is Mandy B on Full Tilt, and I will be playing some 1-2 no limit cash game. Let's see, I like full ring a little bit better because people play back at you less. If you raise in late position, say you have like a Jack 10 suited or something, you raise in late position at a full ring table, in my experience, it's less likely that someone out of the big blinds will repop you or something, you know, like with a hand like that, you want to see the flop, you don't want to get re-raised by one of the blinds. Seems like, yeah, there's less people playing back at you pre-flop. I don't know, I don't play 6-max that much, so I don't know the differences between the two that well, but people definitely play more aggressive at the 6-max because you should, because there's fewer people and the blinds come around faster. If you make a raise pre-flop, like in a tournament, if you raise pre-flop and you just win the blinds and ante, you're usually happy with that. But in a cash game, you know, you only, like if I raise to $6 before the flop and everyone folds, I'm only getting $3. So that's not really the purpose of raising a cash game. It's more to build the big pot if you have a good hand, or it helps you define your opponent's hand. If you make a raise pre-flop, it's easier to put them on a hand. It also, you take control of the hand by raising, so you're really raising for those reasons. Well, I have ace-queen. I'm in early position, but it's a good hand, so I'm still going to raise it up. I probably wouldn't raise ace-jack here, but I'll raise ace-queen. It's probably about the worst hand I'd raise in this position, which I like to call over the gun. Just because, I don't know, everyone else calls it under the gun +1, but I think over the gun, you know, it makes more sense. Okay, so this is a good flop to make a continuation bet on. I'm going to bet $7. Any flop that has one big card and then two small cards is a good flop to make a continuation bet on. And I got called, and that's a pretty bad card. If he had a flush draw, he made it. And if he had a jack, I'd probably try bluffing him off. But since I don't know anything about this player, just sat at the table, I'm probably just going to give up on the pot at this point. Unless maybe another heart came and he checked to me, then maybe I'd try to bluff. But I'm just going to give it up at this point. Okay, now this is a hand. I'd be interested to know what other people would do with these 9s under the gun. In cash games, I like to limp with pocket pairs a lot more often than I would in a tournament. Because in a cash game, I definitely want to see a flop with a pocket pair, because the stacks are so deep that if you hit a set, you can get paid off really big. So I usually don't open with pocket pairs very often in cash games because I don't want to get repopped and then have to fold and then lose my chance of hitting a set. So I'm definitely more likely to limp in with a pocket pair in a cash game than I would be in a tournament. I don't recommend limping with aces very often in a cash game because the stacks are so deep that you know, if you limp with aces, you're really hoping that someone raises behind you and you can re-raise, because if you limp and everyone limps around as the limp pot, then it becomes hard to play. But at the same time, if you do limp in with those aces and then someone raises and then you re-raise, it's announcing that you have a big hand, you know, whereas if you had just entered the pot raising to begin with, it doesn't necessarily seem as strong than if you limp and re-raise. So that's one reason why I don't think it's that good to do it. I mean, you should definitely do it once in a while to mix up your play, so that it's not, you know, if you limp in early position with pocket pair, people won't know for sure that you don't have a strong hand. So you should do it once in a while if you know that your opponents are observing your tendencies and playing off that. Or if someone's just, you know, raising every time people limp in, then that might be another situation where you might want to do it. But in general, I think it's better to just come in for a raise with the big hands. This is a hand that if this guy folds to me, I'm not going to raise just to try to pick up the blinds. I don't really think it's, with this deuce in the hand, it makes it a pretty bad hand, and you know, I'm not really getting much out of it. I'd only be getting $3, and I'm going to raise it to at least 6 if I raise. So there's not a whole lot of value in stealing the blinds in a cash game. There's some value. You have to do it somewhat, but King Deuce, even suited, isn't the type of hand I'd be doing it with. If I were raising basically to steal the blinds, I'd still want to do it with somewhat of a playable hand, you know. Even like an 8-5 suited, I'd rather do it with than a King Deuce. A hand like 8-5 suited, even though technically, you know, the King Deuce might be ahead of that, the 8-5 suited is a much more playable hand because, you know, you can make straight, you can make a flush, and if you have the King Deuce and you flop a hand like top pair, you're always going to be a little uncomfortable. You don't know if you have like the best kicker or not, whereas if you have a hand like 8-5 suited, you know, you're probably, if you flop a pair, it's probably not going to be top pair, so you're not going to lose a ton if you're out kicked. It's kind of the hand where you would want to like flop big, or, you know, flop like a pair and a straight draw, a pair and a flush draw, something like that to go with it. You just have a better idea of where you stand when you play a hand like 8-5 suited than if you play a hand like a King Deuce suited where you don't know if you're out kicked or not. So it plays a little bit better. So this is a hand, if there was a raise coming in before me, I would definitely just fold it. If this guy hadn't limped, then I would raise, but since he has limped, I'm just going to limp in. It's kind of a marginal hand. It's not as great as it looks. That's a pretty good flop for it. Let's see what this guy does. Okay, I could raise here, or I could just call. I think I'm just going to call. Don't really want to play too big of a pot with one pair, and I guess that's the main reason, pot control. I probably had the best hand, so I'm going to make a bet, $9. I guess the main reason for not raising is just pot control, and deciding if I should make a value bet here. I think I'll make a, it's kind of thin. Nah, I could make a value bet. If I knew more about this player, I'd make a value bet there. Turns out I should have. I mean, he got lucky and hit the 9, but most of the time he wouldn't have, and so probably should have. I don't know. If I knew more about this player, when I first get to a table before I know much about people, I usually opt for the more conservative road. That was part of the reason why I just called there. I'm usually trying to keep the pot smaller and not make as thin of value bets until I know more about the people at the table. Just kind of trying to stay out of trouble a little bit until I, you know, figure out who are the people who are going to pay off the value bets and who are the people who aren't. And I'm always going to fold ace-5 under the gun. Even suited, I'm going to fold that under the gun most of the time. Ace-rag is a bad hand, and you shouldn't play it. You especially don't want to play it in early position. Maybe if you have like an ace suited and it's folded to you in late position, it's fine to raise in that situation, but you never want to limp in with an offsuit ace and a bad card in early position. It's a trouble hand. It's a hand where if you flop, you know, an ace, you might stand to lose a lot if someone has a better kicker, and you're not going to win a lot. So say you have like an ace-5 and the flop comes ace, king, 6. You know, if someone has a hand like king, queen, they're not going to lose very much to you because the ace scares them off. But if someone has a better ace, you know, you could lose a decent amount. Or if there's 2 aces and you have a hand like ace-5 and someone has a better kicker, you know, you might lose your whole stack. So the reason you'll play it is because if you're behind, you might lose a lot. And if you're ahead, you're not going to win very much with it. So you should just stay away from the ace-rags, especially in early position. So here are the king deuce suited again. I will go ahead and complete the small blinds. I can make an argument for folding as well out of small blind here. So there's a lot of texture to this flop, a lot of potential draws, but I think I'm just going to check call to keep the pot small. I could, this guy's so short, I could actually make a big check raise because he only has 35 behind. So I could do that, but I'm going to keep the pot small and just call. That's a bad card for me. Well, I guess there's a lot of things he could have. He could have, you know, a flush draw. He could have a king. Could have the queen. I really don't know. To tell you the truth. A lot of the times in poker, it's not like you necessarily know the right way to play, you know. So some of the times you have absolutely no idea what you should do, and you know that's true of everyone. You know, sometimes the pros also just have no idea what they should do in a particular hand. I don't really know where I stand in this hand at all. I know 3 of spades definitely was not a good card. If he was betting the flush draw, then he just got there. The best that I can hope for at this point, well, I have to pay that off, is that he has a king also, and that's a split pot. But I'm going to pay it off. If he had moved all in, I might not, but I'm obviously going to call $5 more. And he did have the flush draw. Okay, time to add on. I always try to keep a full stack. If I don't have a full stack, then the hands that I want to play, like medium pocket pairs, are less playable. The most profitable aspect of cash games are hitting sets. That's what you want to basically try to do. Most of the people at the table in a cash game, actually at this table there's a decent number of short stacks, but most of the time everyone will have a lot of chips in front of them, and if you hit a set you could potentially win a big pot. So that's probably the biggest money maker in a cash game, is hitting sets. So I want to have a full stack for when that opportunity comes along, so that I can, you know, double up a full stack if I get lucky and hit a set. It's not that big of a problem for me in terms of if I get a long run of cold cards and I'm just folding. It's not really a problem for me in terms of getting bored and playing a bad hand. I definitely do that when I play live, but when I'm playing online, if I get bored because I'm getting a bunch of bad cards, you know, I'm usually more likely to, you know, start looking around the internet or doing things I shouldn't be doing, but I usually don't respond by playing bad cards. Usually I just respond by not paying as much attention to the table as I should. But one way to avoid that is, if you're always going through, what I normally do when I play the cash games is I have the hand history windows open, and I'm always going through and looking for hands that got shown down. So this hand got shown down, so I'd go through and I'd look to see how they played it. And then, you know, I'd take notes. If either of them did anything that stood out to me, then I'd take notes on it, and then I'd continue scrolling through the hands. And sometimes I might be a ways behind in the hand history, but usually I'm constantly going through looking for those hands that get shown down so I can take notes. And if you're doing that, you really shouldn't get too bored, because that should, it should keep you busy if you're doing that. If you're still bored, then maybe you can play 2 tables at a time. I do that usually. If I'm playing cash games, I'll usually play 2 at a time. 8-7 is definitely a playable hand. If this guy had folded, I'd probably even raise. But he limped in, so I'd limp in as well. It's definitely advantageous to see a lot of flops in position, and since you can do it so cheaply in a cash game, and you know, in a tournament you can't do that a lot of the times because limping in is too high a percentage of your stack, but in cash games you can do that a lot. You can see a lot of flops in position, and you should if you can. This is kind of interesting. I picked up a open-ended straight drop, but there's potentially a flush out there. And since 2 people called my bet on the flop, one of them could definitely already have that flush, so I'm going to just check it. Well, I think someone would call me with an ace, and since they both checked on the river too, I don't think that they had a flush, but I think that I'd get called by an ace, so that's why I didn't want to bet. You know, when you bluff, you have to think about what hands you're representing, and I wouldn't want to bluff there because I don't know what hand it could look like that I possibly had. You know, if I had the flush, I would have bet it on the turn. Okay, this hand, I could play this, but it's kind of a drawing hand, and I'm in fairly early positions, so I'll just fold it. I could have played it either way. But this last hand, you have to think about what you're representing, and I wouldn't really be able to represent anything, you know. I didn't bet the turn, so I probably don't have the flush, and you know, it's just, it doesn't look like I have anything, so it's not a good place to bluff, basically. You know, maybe I'd be making a value bet with an ace. That'd be a pretty thin value bet to be making, and it's just so unlikely that I have a big hand. You know, if I had a 9, then I probably would have bet the turn. You know, so well, I don't know about that. Maybe if I had made some bluff with nothing and had a 9, then I'd check it on the turn. But it's just unlikely that I'd have anything, and I think that my opponents would be able to pick up on that, so no reason to bluff.